newish
Hi.
organization.
You just snuck up on
Essentially
me.
a national.
Board meeting. And I wanted to wish you all a welcome this morning. I'm Linda Simmons, and I'm the TriMet Board President. And today, we're going to experience the TriMet Board of Directors meeting for September 28th, 2022. I want to thank you for joining us here at the University of Oregon. It's our first in-person meeting since April, I believe. And we hope to offer hybrid meetings in the future, but while we work out all the technical aspects, we welcome your audience, and of course, we welcome anyone who's here in person. And if you choose to wear a mask, that's optional, and we understand that. All TriMet board meetings are also available to watch live on TriMet's YouTube channel, and I do appreciate everyone's flexibility. Normally, we start with a public forum. However, today, no one has signed up to address the board. So we're going to go right away into the board reports. But before we actually start the board reports, I'm going to ask Director Gonzalez to give us an update. He has just come back from a conference, and he'll tell us a little bit all about it. And I should also mention that one of our board members is running a little bit late. Director Edwards and Director Lewis is out ill. So go ahead, Ozzie.
Thank you. Boy, this is live. Getting used to the real world once again. Good morning, everyone. Director Gonzalez, and thank you, President Simmons. To the staff and board, I'm happy to report of a recent experience I had going to the Latinos in Transit conference in Dallas, Texas. It was their second annual conference, and it's a growing national organization that functions as an employee resource group for Latinos in the transit industry. I was fortunate enough to be invited to participate on a panel session about leaders in the transit industry. And so I was lucky enough to sit with some colleagues that are also board members, one from DART, the first Latina board member in DART, and several others that are representing boards in other agencies in our country. And each of us got to tell our stories, got to answer some questions for the crowd. And it was a day-and-a-half conference predominantly about getting to know one another as professionals in the industry. And I was really proud to represent TriMet that day. I'm looking forward to seeing what else that organization is doing. They're actually going to be hosting a scholarship reception for a leadership program that they also run. It will be at an upcoming conference in Seattle. I believe it's an APTA-affiliated conference. They will be celebrating their first cohort from the leadership program. And I look forward to seeing how we can start leveraging their employee resource group, how we can begin connecting some of our staff and leaders into that community, and seeing how we can help leverage and diversify our leadership through having them find mentors in Latinos in Transit. So it was a great experience. I got to hang out in Dallas, Texas for a few days. It was wonderful to experience slightly warmer weather than we had here. And I think overall it was a wonderful connection for our agency.
Thank you. I'm glad that you were able to participate. We're going to move into the board reports now, and I'm going to start with Vice President Irish Bauman, who is going to give the report on the Finance and Audit Committee meeting that happened this morning. Director Bauman.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be back in person. The Finance and Audit Committee met this morning, just before this meeting. I'll report on just 4 items that we had on the agenda. The first was that General Manager Sam Dessou gave us an update on the strategy session that the board will participate in a week from today. That's around fair strategy. The board will hear reports on and will discuss the strategic role that fairs play in the financial health of TriMet. For the board members, the start time on the meeting will be announced later today, but it is October 5th. Next, we heard a report from Nancy Young-Oliver on 2 items. The first is that the fiscal year 24 budget process is just getting underway. And secondly, today the board is going to be approving a budget transfer resolution. And so we heard a little bit about that, about some changes, some restructuring, including the transfer of the new IDEA division. And these budget transfers aren't increasing any costs. It's just kind of moving funds within the budget, and we'll hear more about that later. Then Kim Sewell gave us a report about the status on the bus operator hiring bonuses that we've all heard about that have been very successful in increasing applications for bus operators. The agency is preparing to expand that into a retention bonus that will go to bus operators who are already on staff, with the eye towards retaining them, which is very important. And this is partly in response to some issues that the board has heard about regarding the Oregon Pay Equity Act. Then finally, John Gardner talked to us about the Title VI resolution, and again, the board is going to hear more about that this morning, about the report that TriMet submits to the FTA every 3 years. And that is the report.
Does anyone have any questions for Director Bauman? Thank you, Director Bauman. Next, we're going to have a report from Director Kim, who's going to give us a report on the Metro Policy Advisory Committee.
Of course. Good morning. At the August MPAC meeting, there were 3 briefings and discussions at MPAC. First, we heard about a process underway to consider an urban growth boundary exchange to add land in the River Terrace area of Tigard and to remove land from another area of UGB. Metro is evaluating right now potential areas to withdraw from the UGB that are less ready for development than the 350 acres Tigard is proposing to include. There will be further discussion with AMPEC as Metro continues to evaluate potential areas to consider withdrawing from the UGB. And second, we heard a report from Metro staff about progress on the regional housing bond. We learned about progress and outcomes since its 2018 passage, geographic distribution for the project, community engagement, and the charge of the oversight committee. And we discussed how rental assistance vouchers are used as a tool in the program, and interest of many jurisdictions in using those funds to support affordable home ownership programs. And lastly, we had a discussion about the update to the high-capacity transit strategy within the Regional Transportation Plan, the RTP. And as you know, TriMet is actively working with Metro on this study, considering proposed updates to transit policy in the RTP and the assessment of corridor readiness for future high-capacity transit priorities. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Director Kim? Hearing none. Thank you so very much. Next, we're going to go on to hear an update on Reimagining Public Safety Committee. And providing us that report today is Marissa Clark. Welcome, Marissa. And she's providing it for Director Lewis, who's home ill.
Yes, thank you. The Reimagined Public Safety Advisory Committee took a 1-month break and did not meet in August, but we resumed on September 20th, and we met via Zoom. We said goodbye to 3 members who have other obligations or have changed roles at their agency since joining the committee. This month, Safety and Security Director Executive Director Andrew Wilson presented a timeline for finalizing our work with the committee at the conclusion of the initiatives with a proposed celebration with all of you January of 2023. Director Pat Williams gave a security update on hiring efforts for staffing and of unarmed system presence. We had an increase in hiring to get us closer to the allocated numbers. These include the safety response team, security, and our customer safety supervisors. The committee has spent the last 5 months discussing the elements of a quarterly security report, which will be made available to the board. At the September meeting, we reviewed the final template and layout to begin implementation on a quarterly basis. Chief Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Officer John Gardner reviewed the proposed 2023 survey template that will be used to get the community's thoughts on our progress towards creating a safer and more welcoming system. The committee has provided feedback on the questions, the length, and has great suggestions for outreach, of which they will be a part of when the survey is launched in the spring of 2023. Finally, the committee was prepped for a discussion at next month's meeting regarding the roles and responsibilities of the safety response team. We want to make sure that the team exceeds the intent of the initiative. The committee will make recommendations at next month's meeting for duties that could enhance their effectiveness. And for the remaining meetings of this year, 2022, we will meet for 2 hours rather than just 1.5 to ensure time is sufficient for robust conversations. There was no public comment at the September meeting, and the next meeting is scheduled for October 18th, also via Zoom.
Thank you. I have a question
Yeah.
for you. One of the first things that you said was that the conclusion of the committee's work,
Yes.
does that mean the committee would be disbanded?
We will probably move to a quarterly basis with more open forum is kind of the plan. We've worked through a lot of the initiatives with staff and committee members, but of course the work continues.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question?
Mm-hmm.
Director Way.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. So you just mentioned that there were 3 seats that were now open. Just given the frequency of the meetings in 2023, are those positions to be filled between now through the end of the year, or how would that work if folks are interested in serving?
Yeah, that's a great question. Since we only have 3 more meetings left for this year, we probably will look at filling those positions in the new year if we go to a quarterly basis or just open forum. But we definitely want to make sure that we have equal representation because, as you know, we did lose someone representing Clackamas County. So,
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much.
I have one question.
Director
Thank you,
Gonzalez.
President Simmons. With regarding the hiring update, it sounds like we're closer to the target. How close are we these days?
Director Pat Williams has exact numbers,
Yeah.
or
Pardon.
Executive Director.
Wasn't trying to.
No, that's okay.
That's good. No, that's good. And it's a good question. And thanks, Marissa. And Marissa's been a part of this effort since the very beginning, so it's important for her to step in. And Dr. Lewis was very good about saying, hey, yeah, have Marissa do it. And I think John is actually speaking about something else today, too, so he wasn't going to. We are getting closer, Director Gonzalez. As of this morning, we have 92 security officers. That's the most. We've actually had 32 additional security officers since May. So that's helpful. We have moved our SRT group from 24 earlier this year. You remember we started this group in September of last year as a pilot. We have 42 of those individuals out there in the system today, which is awesome, and we're moving up to 48. Customer safety supervisors, another unarmed response for us. We had 18 at the beginning of the year. We'll have 37 coming up. So we're really doing a lot of additions and responding to the community, really wanting that unarmed presence out there as much as possible. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
All right. Thank you. It's always interesting. I think we're also going to be getting a report from you at our October meeting, a much more comprehensive report. We look forward to that. Thank you. Okay, next, we're going to hear from the Transit Equity Advisory Committee, and Director Way will provide us with that report.
Great, thank you. Hi, good morning, everybody. TAC members received an update on our exciting FX2 division launch, and we know that event has happened, and it was a wonderful celebration. There were several of us from the board who attended. our general manager, Dasu, fed a lion dance, some cabbage, and that was wonderful to see. So it was just great to see a lot of our TriMet staff and members of our executive team, as well as, of course, community members there. TriMet staff at the TIAC meeting in September also worked very closely with our bridge housing partners to provide an overview of the Hollywood Transit Hub. This is really exciting because that particular provider will be delivering up to 200 permanently affordable homes. And we know that we definitely need more affordable housing in our region. Our members were very engaged in this presentation. They asked various questions regarding site circulation for all different user groups, routing for buses serving the Hollywood Transit Center, as well as the income thresholds for qualification for those housing units. So lots of great questions. There was also some suggestions around adding public restrooms in the area, noting that this could serve as a need for riders who are also transferring in and out of the transit, the Hollywood Transit Hub. And then I know that we will also receive a presentation from Director Gardner soon around Title VI program update, but we also had a report provided around that and just some of the analysis done around our equity work there and impact on various populations. And then last but not least, we also heard from members of our ad hoc charter review. So as folks may remember, TIAC had about a 2-day retreat over the summer to really sort of, revisit what is our charter, what is our guiding document, principle, values moving forward as a TIAC committee of TriMet. And so I was very pleased that we had some members just volunteer stepping up and say, we want to take a look at the charter and we want to, look at membership and how do we rotate, chairs and leaders as a part of this work. So there was the document provided more clarity of roles, again, membership, term limits. Members agreed to 2 years on the committee. That sounded very appropriate since a lot of them also have full-time jobs and are also doing this volunteer work on the side. And then there were some conversations around members' appointment by their organizations. Again, a lot of our TIAC members are part of organizations that serve various diverse communities in our region, as well as transit-dependent folks. So sort of important to mention the organizations that these folks were coming from. And then there was a discussion around providing stipends. That has been, just an ongoing interest, right? These are unpaid volunteers, and we know that there's some stipend conversations happening for other committees that we're using public engagement on. So that's what I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Director Gonzalez?
Thank you, President Simmons. Thank you for the report, Director Y. I'm glad to hear that the community is leaning into looking at the charter updates, and I'm very excited to know that we're having conversations about stipends. There's a lot that we rely on this community members for. The information they bring and the perspective they share is hugely valuable. They are power users of our systems, and they have a high interest in the work, in ensuring that the work we do serves their constituents. I consider it an essential role that they not only participate, but that they bring that value to the committee. So I'm really glad that we're looking at ways to make sure that their presence and their contribution is there.
Thank you. Anyone else? Our last report this morning will be from Director Edwards, who's going to give us an update on the Committee on Accessible Transportation. Director Edwards, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to see everyone today. Last week's CAP meeting was well attended. Along with the CAP members, the TriMet staff was well represented, along with the public. Kudos to Margot Moore, who really helped get the staff there. And it's important for staff to be able to hear all the issues and concerns that are brought about in that CAP meeting. Pat Williams was unable to attend, but Janelle White filled in. And Ms. White gave updates on the security personnel, new hires, and projected hires. Concerns were raised regarding stops that appear unsafe and unsanitary. This is very challenging for those with disabilities. It was noted that TriMet must work with the cities and counties to improve and maintain these areas because of adjacent areas that are not owned by TriMet. Any suggestions regarding the CAT fiscal year 23 work plan should be sent to Margot Moore by this Friday, September 30th. And in that work plan, it talks about the purpose and of the CAT committee. And we talked about that briefly, that CAT is here to normalize the usage and ridership of TriMet. And it's very important that we look at things through that accessibility lens in order to make sure that that happens. There were concerns raised regarding input from the CAT on the Hollywood hub. Safety was a primary concern regarding accessing TriMet buses and/or MAX with the changes at that location. And that completes my report. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Director Edwards. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Seeing Director Gonzalez.
Pardon me, all of a sudden I'm full of questions. Thank you for the report, Director Edwards. Should anyone be interested in comments about the work plan? I was just curious to know, aside from getting them to Margaret Moore, is there anything, is this for public or is this for board members, the comment period?
No, it's for the public as well.
And where can the public find this information, should they be interested in commenting?
They would be able to find that information, I think, on the website, if I'm not mistaken.
If not, we'll make sure we get it on the website.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Edwards.
Thank you. Moving on, as part of today's reports, I want to bring before the board the performance review of the general manager. When Sam DeSue Jr. was first appointed as general manager in June of 2021, the board provided written performance objectives for the period July 2021 through June 2022. The measures and outcomes of those objectives have been provided to the board and are among the basis for this review. As part of this year's general management evaluation process, I headed up the evaluation committee, which consisted of myself and Vice President Baumann and Secretary Treasurer Gonzalez. We reviewed the measures and objectives and reached out to all of the board to understand your thoughts on General Manager DeSue's performance, and then summarized his performance review in the memo that's attached in your packet. So I'm going to ask the board if anyone has any comments they wish to make about the general manager's performance at this time before we actually take action on the review. Director Baumann and then Director Edwards.
Well, thank you. I'll just briefly say that Sam has come to TriMet at a really challenging time for the city of Portland and for the transit industry generally, and he has really worked tirelessly to keep us on track and to continue to look for ways to improve our service, even under our very challenging circumstances. So I very much appreciate Sam's performance and wanted kind of add my voice to the positive review that the board is providing.
Director Gonzalez? Director Edwards. Well, gee, Director Gonzalez, you don't want to say anything?
I do, but I haven't gotten in the queue.
Okay.
Thank you. I certainly concur with that as well, that General Manager DeSue has done a yeoman's job in regard to all the things that have come before him in the past year and a half. And it's been very challenging. I mean, pandemic, we've had personnel changes and challenges with trying to hire personnel. And with all these things going on, it's been very difficult. And like I say, I think he's done a yeoman's job in making sure that TriMet continues to operate at the level that it has.
Director Gonzalez?
Thank you. I was trying to be courteous to others. Thank you very much to my fellow board members for highlighting the difficulty of the moment in which General Manager Sam Dessou stepped in. I simply wanted to add that yes, you've come in at a difficult time, and for the sake of not only sharing this with you here, but for the sake of everyone, you've done a fantastic job of transitioning from an operational focus to really moving into leadership and bringing folks together. What you have done for bringing our leadership into conversations about what's next for us. What you've done with our relationships with our transit workers union is remarkable, and it really speaks to your character as a leader. I look forward to watching your evolution into really helping us shape the future of this organization. But I'd like to say the DNA for trust building, for giving people that space to feel dignified in their work is the stuff that I don't know where people learn those things, but I'm really glad you have them. So thank you for the leadership you're bringing. I'm really excited to see what's ahead.
Director Wei?
Thank you. Well, Director Gonzalez stole a little bit of my thunder by talking about leadership, because that was just what I wanted to talk about. But, one of the most important jobs that we have as a TriMet board member is to hire our general manager, as he is overseeing this organization and hundreds of employees. So, I think it's with great pride and respect that I really thank our general manager, Sam Dessou, for just stepping in to the line of fire, particularly among COVID and just so many things that are happening, not only in this region, but just nationally with public transit. So thank you, Sam. And then lastly, I just want to say, I always remember this phrase that my grandfather, who was always a motivator and an inspiration for me, always said. He said, "Great leaders are also great followers." And I look around this room, and the public will not see this, but there's a room full of staff here, from various levels, from various positions, and I believe they really look to your leadership, Sam. But you also follow them as well, because we're not all perfect, right? There's strengths, weaknesses that we all bring, and great leaders recognize what their weaknesses are, but that's why they have a strong team to support their vision. So, thank you.
I would hate to be the only board member, but the reason why I didn't want to speak was because all of my thoughts and sentiments are reflected within the performance evaluation. Great job, excellent work, thank you. And I just want to add that the fact that your sort of a journey into this particular role was, the work from both sides. Looking up as well as looking sideways. I think that's one of the layers that make you a leader with great perspective, because you have that one additional perspective. We have a lot to tackle next year, and really appreciate your work and for all of your staff, all of our staff. So thank you.
Thank you. Sam, this is your opportunity to provide some comments.
Well, I am grateful for all of you. Thank you very much for your comments that were made, and I really appreciate it. But I will tell you that there's no Sam Dessou without the people that you see out here that supported TriMet and this organization. And I want to just tell all of you, thank you for what you do for this community, for TriMet, and also thank you for your leadership as well. President Simmons, members of the board, I sat before many of you a year ago and thanked you for the opportunity of you being selected me to be the general manager. And not long after that, I submitted my goals to you, just as well as the 100-day plan. And I know that I can proudly report to you today that 98% of the focus areas were achieved that was submitted to you. And I just want to call out a couple of the accomplishments, if you would just bear with me for a moment. you asked me to go out into the community and connect with business leaders. And we did that. We went out, and I'll be talking about a trip that I'm leaving here this afternoon, going back to meet with Congressman DeFazio. We were the only transportation agency that was selected to come to his last Transportation and Infrastructure Committee meeting tomorrow in Washington, D.C. And they want us. They requested TriMet out of every agency to come and talk about the Rescue Act funding, the CARES Act money that we received, how it impacted Portland and our region. And I'll be representing all of us to be able to do that. We as an agency, we made great strides on our safety, having a safe system, being welcoming to everyone. We've installed digital systems, screens, our bus system. We've increased service. We've decreased service over the last couple of years. Our new transit priority projects, with the support of our partners to keep our buses moving. We kicked off the comprehensive service analysis, which you will see today, and we have with us in the audience Jarrett Walker and all of our planning team that's going to be talking about that. That's a concept that you're going to hear a lot about. Our safety and security side, we're fortunate to be able to bring the City of Milwaukee Police Department back to our Transit Division Police Services. We've introduced, you heard Andrew come up and talk about our safety response team to provide that additional layer of safety and security and support for all of the people that use our services throughout the transit system. We've made important strides on our system. We have a blue line that's 34 years old, and we're replacing assets that's on the blue line. We've completed the Lloyd Max improvement projects. We are working on a better red right now to expand our red line. We have just implemented the Division Transit Project. Not only that, reaching the new record for work performed by disadvantaged business enterprises, or DBEs. More than 75% of that project, that construction, was done by DBEs. And that's the most of any major project that TriMet or any other large public transit agency has attained in the state of Oregon. And we're working to continue to do more and to do better. I've requested Director Edwards and others a study of our diversity, equity, and inclusion practices in an effort to potentially identify potential blind spots. We've created the special office that John and his team will be moving directly to the general manager for overseeing those efforts. We've put in place an aggressive hiring bonus to help combat the staffing issues that we're having. And I just want to tell you, I continue to share my gratitude for our employees, our customers, and for you, each one of you, and really appreciate the opportunity to share these comments today. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I'm grateful, and I thank you for working with me through this first year.
Thank you, General Manager DeSue. So moving forward, as outlined in the memo, and as we've just discussed, the General Manager has met most of the performance expectations established by the board when he first was appointed. With the positive job performance and with your comments just moments ago, I'd like to proceed in taking action on the General Manager DeSue's review, including providing a wage increase. Is there a motion to accept the performance review?
So moved.
Before us and to provide the pay raise? It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. So any further discussion before we vote? Hearing none, I'm going to ask all in favor. Say aye.
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 Any abstentions? Didn't hear any. Motion carries. Thank you all, and thank you, General Manager DeSue, for all your hard work leading this large and dynamic agency. In the coming weeks, we will establish performance expectations for the General Manager for the next year. Now I'm going to hand off the report back to the General Manager for his monthly report.
Okay. First of all, I would be remiss. Kim just sent me a text that I want to make sure I inform you. The information about the work plan that you talked about, Director Edwards, it could be found at www.trimet.org/cat. And that's per Margot. And if wanted to bring that forward, if you want to comment, there's the area to be able to comment. Okay, good morning, board and staff, public that's here online. Thank you all for being here. This morning, we're going to be sharing information on a couple of things. One, we're going to celebrate the launch of our first frequent express bus service that's known as FX. We're going to review August ridership report numbers, and then I'll briefly talk about the strategic priorities for the business plan. So let me start off. I just want to thank all of you that came out to the FX grand opening celebration back on September 17th. And I just want to pause and tell you how much of an outstanding event that it was there. It was one that I think I will never forget in my life. There was probably 200 to 300 people at the grand opening. And to be able to go to the 3 locations and just witness how the community embraced the service that we provided to them and owned it. And I've had numerous of folks come up to me when I was out traveling at the 3 different locations, just thanking us for the opportunity to put a fast service in place to be able to get them from Gresham to downtown Portland and really to connect the communities. It was wonderful. The FX will increase access to opportunities such as jobs and education. It will reduce traffic congestions, air pollution along the corridor between Gresham and downtown Portland. I just want to take this moment here just to thank all of you who joined me last week to kick the celebration off at the PCC Southeast campus. Also want to thank all of our employees that was there to also be part of this celebration. It was an honor for me to stand with the FTA Region Administrator, Linda Gerke, Congressman Earl Blumenauer, Metro Council President Lynn Peterson, Mayors Ted Willer and Travis Stovall, Portland Transportation Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, and Raymore President Jeff Moreland, and then each one of you that was there at the event. That project laid the foundation for FX. And now we're delivering this new type of high-capacity bus services to our community. I was out just this past weekend on Division at PDX Slider having a hamburger or slider and just sat outside and felt the aroma and just the people talking about the green buses and the kids wanting to go and get on the bus, want to watch how people park bicycles on the bus, and they want to get inside of the bendy section of the buses. Just really love it. And then there's children, they were out at the event flying in their green FX superhero capes that we provided them as well. And just to see the childlike excitement that was there from the Lego sets, and then the many busloads of fans that was on the buses going back and forth. Just an impact that was made on Division Street, that was made in every community that we connected. We're going to bring faster service, better service to the community, and that's what the community asked us to do. And now that's laid the foundation for which future projects will grow from. And it's something that we're going to definitely look at that. And I know I, for one, am excited about what's coming. And I just want to thank you, board. I want to thank you, staff. I want to thank everybody, the public. Thank you. Well done. And also, I'll be remiss to say all of our partners that was there with us and that's been along the way, thank you as well. And way to go on that. Now for a quick update on our ridership. In August, TriMet provided nearly 4.8 million rides. That's up nearly 20% from a year ago, August. And we're almost at 60% of where our ridership was back in August of 2019, before the COVID pandemic. I would like to bring Alan Leto, if he's out, I see him, if you could come up just for a moment here. Alan is working to develop our FY 2024 plan, and one of the early steps in the process is to identify strategic high-level priorities, and he brings those forward today. Alan?
Great, thank you, Sam. Thank you. I'll be very brief. We'll have more time to talk at the next meeting, but because the business plan is something that we need to update each year, even though there's a 5-year look ahead, things keep changing, as we know. We start off the season in the fall to talk about strategic priorities and where we need to go and really put our focus for the coming year. The coming year being FY 2024, which will start, of course, July 1st of 2023, but in order to stay ahead of having the business plan finalized at the time that you're seeing the draft budget so that we keep those well in line, we need to start now. So there's a single page in your packet of strategic priorities, and these reflect essentially the same priorities that we had in the business plan for this current year, but trying to make them even simpler and more straightforward. There were a lot of bullet points in the last one, and we want to just have that as much focus and clarity as possible. So these are proposed, something for you to think about and kind of chew on, and then I think we'll have the opportunity to have conversation and really give you the opportunity to give us the direction that you're seeing us needing to focus in on at the next meeting.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
So my last two items, President Simmons, one is, as I talked to you earlier, that Chair DeFazio has requested TriMet to come and speak at his very last House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. And the purpose, again, for TriMet being selected is for the Congress members to hear from us on how the American Rescue Plan Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, how it's affected American families, our public, what's been the impact here in the Portland region. So I'll be leaving directly after the board meeting to fly directly to Washington, D.C. and present. And that concludes my report this morning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any comments for the general manager? Director Way?
Thank you. Just a quick question, and so exciting. Thank you for representing us in DC. Will that meeting be live streamed, or is, I don't know how things work over there, but
JC,
do you know if the
Tom?
public will have access?
JC or Tom, any thoughts there?
JC's not here.
He's not. Oh, Roberta, do you know if the meeting's going to be live streamed? The House committee meeting in DC?
They usually are. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. We're going to now move into the consent agenda. And for items that appear on the consent agenda are usually considered routine and can be acted on by one blanket motion. And today we have two items on the consent agenda. One is the minutes from our last meeting on August 10th, and a resolution directing the reading of any ordinance by title only. Would anyone on the board want to make any modifications in the minutes? Hearing none. Okay, is there a motion then to approve the items contained in the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Bauman. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. So now we move on to the resolutions, the meat and potatoes of the meeting. The first resolution comes before the board this morning is Resolution 22-09-51, approving the 2022 Title VI program. Mr. General Manager, your comments.
President Simmons, members of the board, the FTA requires TriMet to submit an updated Title VI program every 3 years. Each Title VI program update must be first received. I was hearing a little bit of feedback. I'm hearing myself in this speaker.
I know.
Okay, each Title VI program must be, let's see if I can sit back a little bit from the microphone. Test, 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 test. Okay. I'll turn it off. So each Title VI program must be updated and must first receive board approval. And that's the purpose of the resolution here before you today. Title VI prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, and receiving federal assistance. Through our extensive engagement,
Thank you, General Manager Dessou, and good morning, President Simmons, members of the board. Let me see if we can figure out this technology really quickly. Excellent. So I'm very excited to give you all an overview of TriMet's 2022 Title VI program update and answer any of your questions this morning. So as General Manager Dessou said, Title VI represents Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which among many things states that no person, this is the feedback, in the United States shall, on the grounds of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Should I pond for? Okay.
The other mic.
It's off.
Oh, good.
I can turn off mine. Mine's off.
try again.
How, does that sound better? No.
Test, 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 test. Test. Test 1, 2, 3.
We'll take a break. Oh, now I have an echo too.
President Simmons, members of the board, for letting me provide this update on TriMet's 2022 Title VI program update. So every 3 years, like every other public organization receiving federal funds, we're required to update and submit a triennial program review of our Title VI program to ensure that we're keeping in compliance with the federal statutes and requirements. And that's what you have before you today. Our triennial update process include engaging with internal and external stakeholders, reviewing our service and the regional demographic updates, looking across 19 other transit properties to look at their Title VI programs and standards for comparison, reviewing our investigation and monitoring approach, and working with community partners to update the program approach. Specifically, we integrated our efforts with what you'll hear later today, Forward Together. So just a quick reminder, the main thing you all get a chance to review and walk through 2 or 3 times a year is our Title VI service analysis. And we have a 15% threshold when it comes to service analysis, but the 2 major service changes involve anything related to fares or any system changes related to service routes, service span, or frequency. And then we have a process to review those service changes to understand if there's any disparate impact or disproportionate burden. And based on that, we develop mitigations or alternative strategies. And that's essentially the vast majority of what the board reviews. When we think about our 15% threshold and our other programmatic thresholds, I think context is important. So this will give you a quick snapshot of how other like properties who provide like ridership and like demographics and communities, how they approach their Title VI program. So in the first column, you'll see sort of how each property looks at income thresholds, and that 150% is 100% of the federal poverty level. So right now, 150% of the federal poverty level for a family of 4 would be around $41,000. I mean, you can get a sense that BART or DART, they do 100%, which is around $20,000. So we're in the middle there. We think it's sensitive. We looked in the past of going up to 200%, but when you start adding that, it's harder to distinguish different geographic census blocks. So trying to target resources is very hard because it blends together. When you look at major service change threshold, you can see we're at 15%. About 4 years ago, we were at 25%, and we decided to become more sensitive, and you can get a sense there's only 2 other properties that are below us in terms of having a threshold that triggers an automatic Title VI review. Most properties are on the 20-25%, and so that just means, again, if any change is greater than that, a Title VI review is required. When it comes to disparate impacts, this talks about our minority or low-income communities experiencing a benefit or a burden at a 3% or greater threshold. So again, we are the most sensitive. I think the closest to us is UTA, which is a 5%. And so that really means 5% more or less of the burden or the benefit is going to that community. And then the same is true for a disproportionate burden. So that's one of the reasons you see Title VI findings or reviews all the time, because we're so sensitive, it triggers an analysis. But we're okay with being overly sensitive when it comes to making sure our low-income and minority riders are being well served. So Forward Together provided an exciting opportunity to provide outreach and clarity around our Title VI program as part of the future of transit. So one of the parallel efforts we did is we did massive outreach and did a lot of surveying, but we wanted folks to understand the difference of the service planning versus the civil rights questions. So we had a very specific section translated in the languages that read like this and had about a dozen questions after it. And again, with the help of our community-based organizations, we actually got a lot of responses. And this occurred about 6 weeks at the beginning of 2023, when we heard from over 5,000 folks across 7 different languages. Our Writers Club continues to be a good source of feedback, but so does our different committees, whether it's the CAT committee or TIAC, in terms of getting the word out. Also, community-based organizations, especially ERCO, and our monthly newsletter are starting to be more reliable sources to get really just-in-time rider responses and feedback. And so we got a lot of that feedback and integrated some of those thoughts into the Title VI update before you today. In terms of where the feedback came, I think sometimes it's helpful to get a sense of, okay, so what are the demographics of the folks responding? What are the ages? What are the genders? And sort of the county responses. You can see about 17% of the responses came from Washington County. That's around just under 1,000. 32% of the responses came from people of color. A very high response rate for folks experiencing a disability, but I think, again, that's because CAT is such a sort of a powerful force of engaging folks. But again, we do ask these questions to try to get a sense of where we're getting feedback from, and I think it's very helpful to inform what we've heard. So taking into consideration everything that we heard over the last 8 months or so, what we've decided to do is we don't really believe there's the need for any program standards or policy changes. We think we have an incredibly sensitive program as it stands, but we do see an opportunity to go beyond simply the minority and the low-income utilization expectations and review and integrate more broadly our equity index, and I'll talk about that in a moment. We also, in developing our major servicing policy, felt it was time to sort of clarify how we actually measure that. And of course, we're going to integrate any of the new census information and American Community Survey data. And one thing we did here is we need to do some work on improving Title VI signage, especially in other languages across the system. So, just as a reminder, TriMet's equity index has 10 elements. So beyond the minority population and low-income population, we also look at limited English proficiency populations along our routes and spans, the senior population, the youth population, as well as people with disabilities. But then we also look at communities that have limited vehicle access households, where low and medium wage jobs are located, where access to affordable housing is located, and also key retail, social, and human services, as well as parks. So the Forward Together group has this and a lot more in terms of their calculations, but this is what we want to do beyond just looking at low-income and minority communities as part of the Title VI work going forward. When it comes to clarifying policies and procedures, one of the things we developed over the last 2 years was like a 30-page how-to analysis book. And so what we wanted folks to understand is how we measure. So when we talk about a 15% change in route miles or service band or frequency as measured by revenue hours. So anyone can take our guidebook, not anyone, but many folks can take our guidebook and do their own analysis and see exactly how we come up with the Title VI review and findings. And so that's just a small clarification. One of the things we wanted just to show you is just, this is an overview of some of the regional census changes that have happened over the last 3 years. And you can get a sense that population, even though the pandemic had many effects and it did slow population growth, the region did grow by around 75,000 folks over the last 3 years. We've gotten more diverse. The last time we submitted, we were 28% people of color. Now we're roughly around 31%. This is our service district, so it'll be a little different than Multnomah County, a little different than what you'll see in the Clackamas or Washington County. And again, it's our service district. We also have gotten a little less poor. So the regional poverty rate of 150% was about 21% 3 years ago, and now it's 17%. And also, we've gotten a little less bilingual in terms of our limited English proficient communities. One of the things we definitely want to do over the next few years is improve system signage, especially non-English signage. What we did hear from that large percentage of folks that responded in different languages was just they could use more support in navigating the system. So that's something you'll be seeing in the next few years. And this program has been available for feedback for the last 45 or so days. It's currently up, oh, it was good for a second there. It's currently up on our webpage, so in addition to your feedback, we'll be integrating this last bit of feedback before we submit if this resolution is approved today. So after today's presentation, we'll take any notes or guidance and hopefully be able to submit in October. So any questions if you have them?
Sorry. Thank you, John, for the presentation. That was very thorough, and I really liked looking at just the numbers, especially around all the different demographic changes that are happening. I'm just curious, so I don't know if we could do slide 13 again, but I think you had said, so within our service district, and this is just information from American Community Survey, I don't know, hypothesizing, but you said that folks are becoming less bilingual and less under the federal poverty line. There was like the income, and so could that be? What do you feel like that could be contributed to?
Great question, Director Wei. So a lot of people have concerns with the 2020 census data. They believe there's a huge undercount in that, and so we might be seeing undercount in ACS data as well. So, but I also think I think the national data shows that we've had less influx of limited English proficient communities into the United States over the last 3 years. So, I mean, that it does make sense that we would see a less population gain in those communities in the Portland metro region. In terms of the poverty is the most interesting to me. I mean, whether you're looking at sort of Oregon State revenue over the last 3 years, despite the pandemic, it's been higher than a lot of people expected. And so that's probably where that's coming from. But also our in-migration is it's not coming from low-income individuals. That's what I would say that's telling us.
I was also going to mention that I think displacement is a huge issue with the price of housing, rent that's just been skyrocketing. I'm just thinking about, I think this data is definitely important, but I think we need to continue to engage our community partners, and again, a lot of our CBOs that have been serving our diverse communities to also provide additional feedback. But I'll just say, I think displacement, gentrification, I think you said it right. I think there's more folks that are from different states that are moving into our region. And, a lot of folks that have been here for generations have been getting slowly pushed out to other places that our service district might not be fully serving them. So I just want to provide that comment.
I agree. Thank you.
Director Gonzalez.
Thank you, President Simmons. Thank you. On the heels of that topic, I actually wanted to see if you could help shed a little light on the data sets that we've selected to utilize. I understand the 2020 census data, but there seems to be an extension of that to bring in the American Community Survey. What about that data set prompted bringing that data into the study as well?
So we always use American Community Survey. It's more up to date. The census only happens every so often. So generally, when you see the next round of Title VI reviews of some of the service changes, we'll be relying on the American Community Survey, because it is literally a survey that happens. And I'm not going to go too deep into research, because we have researchers speaking later who will correct anything I say wrong. But it's to me is the best data sources we have. That plus the qualitative data that we can get from sort of our community outreach and our partners who are doing direct line, frontline services.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions, so.
Also, thank you, John. And just to close, President Simmons, there's no financial impact to accepting these updates, and your approval is recommended.
Okay. Great, thank you. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez, and thank you, Director Edwards. It's been moved and seconded. We've already had opportunity for comment, so I will call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Next this morning, the board will consider Resolution 22-09-52, authorizing the transfer of appropriated funds within the fund year 2022-2023 budget. Mr. General Manager, your comments.
President Simmons, members of the board, there are times during a fiscal year when TriMet must transfer funds internally. One reason for this is to bring actual expenditure amounts in line with those that were projected in the annual budget. Oregon budget law requires the board approval for such transfers. I'm here to request funds from the TriMet's Public Affairs Division, as well as TriMet's Contingency Fund, be transferred to the General Manager's Division. The request comes from TriMet's creation of the IDEA, or an Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Office, and its associated move from Public Affairs to the General Manager's office. The resolution requests two fund transfers, one for $482,000 and a second for $980,000. Both covered costs related to the office move, hiring of additional staff, and required travel and other expenses required for this new but critically important office. Your approval will have no financial impact on the 2022-23 budget, and I recommend your approval. Nancy is also here to answer any questions. I just brought her up just in case if there were questions.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions on this particular proposal?
President Simmons, if I could just clarify, the transfer from Public Affairs is $741,719. We actually left John off of the transfer when we first put this together, but we needed to add him in. He's going with them, so.
Very good, okay. Why don't I ask for a motion on the resolution, and then we can get into discussion. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Director Bauman. Is there a second?
Aye.
Thank you, Director Way. It's been moved and seconded. Now, are there questions and any discussion?
Yes. So it sounds to me like some of these numbers might need to be updated, amended.
No, the resolution that you have in front of you should show $741,719 from Public Affairs, and then $980,000 from contingency.
That's what it shows, and
Yes.
that does include
Okay.
the position you just referenced?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Okay, and then just also the second piece of the transfer is a transfer of $650,000 from the Transportation Division into the Chief Operating Officer's Division. The need for that piece is because, as you know, we have been short on our operators, and we have put a great amount of effort into recruiting and bringing folks on, which means that we need to provide the training for them. And so we are adding some training personnel in order to get the operators trained and out there on the street. All of these transfers does not change our bottom line appropriated funds. It is just moving from one appropriation line to another appropriation line.
Are there any questions? There are no questions. So I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And it doesn't sound like anyone's opposed, so motion carries. Thank you. Next this morning, the board will consider Resolution 22-09-53, authorizing a modification to the contract with AECOM Technical Service, Inc. for construction management, safety specialist, and startup management services for the Division Transit project. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, President Simmons, members of the board. While FX2 Division service is up and running since September 18th, there are still a number of final tasks that must be completed to close out the Division Transit project. This includes some deferred scope items that we were able to restore since the project is under budget, and some key project staff has transitioned to delivering other important capital projects and initiatives. An extension of AECOM's support service will facilitate proper turnover and contract closeout efforts through the early part of 2023. The resolution before you this morning would increase the total value of the contract by $227,000 for the continued service of supplemental staff, bringing the total contract authority to $1.77 million. For diversity, AECOM has achieved 45% participation by certified subcontractors. AECOM's own staff is 40% women and 12% minorities, and the cost of the services will be covered by the Division Transit Project's contingency funds, and I request your approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved, Kim.
Thank you, Director Kim. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Edwards. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions? Director Gonzalez.
I'm curious about AECOM's own staff demographic composition. I understand AECOM is one of the largest design and engineering firms in the world and has close to 100,000 staff. Is this a number for Oregon, or are we talking worldwide?
Michael, are you out there? Can you come up? Also, Nancy, you may want to join him. Just, I know procurement is kind of under your realm, and Les is not here there. So are you talking, Director Gonzalez, the 45%?
The 40% women, 12% minorities. Is this an Oregon number for the Oregon office? Is this the project team, or are we talking just their worldwide operation?
Yeah, I believe this is their local office operated here in Portland.
I appreciate that. I think it's extra relevant when we're talking about large operations that have a footprint well outside of Oregon, to look at what their local team and local composition is. Thank you.
Any other questions on this resolution?
And yes, I do. And this is just a point of clarification. So if I understand this all correctly, there's a modification for 446-136 and an additional authority, proposed additional authority?
No.
I'm hearing no.
I think that we modified their contract once before.
That's correct.
Yes.
And that's the upper figure.
Thank
And
you.
it's the
227,050.
7 is the modification that we're approving today. Yes.
Thank you. That's the clarification I wanted to have. And that is not a contingency number. That's actually something that we want to modify the contract award by.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Director Bauman.
I'll just use this opportunity to say congratulations on the successful completion of the FX project. Congratulations to everyone. Really exciting to have this service available on the east side. And did I hear you say it was under budget?
Yes.
So the community should know that. Congratulations again to TriMet for completing successfully under budget. This has happened before, and we're carrying on that tradition. So I just want everyone to know that, and for us to take a minute and acknowledge great work.
Appreciate it.
So President Simmons, I would love to say too, Michael Kaiser was the project director that led our project. So thank you to him and his leadership and his team as well.
Thanks.
Well, the comment I will make is this is the first of many. I hope you learned a lot from the first one, because I really think the agency needs to consider more rapid transit.
Well, we are already in the works on 82nd Avenue BRT, so
I know. Thank you.
We're excited
Thank you
about
so
that.
much. Okay, so let's have the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And I don't hear any opposition, so motion carries. Thank you. We do have an ordinance to consider this morning, and that's where I ask for the General Counsel to read the ordinance by title only.
Thank you, Ms. Board President. Ordinance number 368 of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon, amending and updating TriMet Code Chapters 18 and 19, and this is the second reading.
Great. Just for the record, Ordinance 368 will amend and update Chapter 18 regarding public comment and the Title VI analysis concerning fare and service changes, and Chapter 19 will eliminate the Honored Citizen Downtown Bus Pass, the use of paper punch cards for lift fares, and validation stickers. So, Mr. General Manager, do you have any comments?
Yes, President Simmons, members of the board, if passed by the board, updates to chapters 18 and 19 of the TriMet Code under this ordinance will include an update to the definition of the term service change, an update to the way TriMet considers public comment for service and route changes, and an update to describe how TriMet relies on Title VI analyses and service and route changes. The ordinance also puts in place recommendations by the Federal Transit administration, which requires TriMet to adopt procedures that inform the public of our use of Title VI equity analysis when modifying routes and fares. It should be noted also that the FTA requirements is procedural, as TriMet already does this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. So we've seen the outreach that's been done to the potentially affected communities of the proposed changes. We've heard no comments from that outreach, and there are no comments from last month's public hearing. The board also received the equity analysis, and the board was in agreement with its findings. Is there a motion to adopt this ordinance?
So moved.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. Is there a second?
Second, Kim.
Thank you, Director Kim. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions? Director Way.
Thank you. I completely understand the rationale and the reasoning behind this ordinance. And I have continued to just bring this up because we know that there are still going to be communities that will be obviously impacted by this change, especially when we're doing away with the Honored Citizen Downtown Bus Pass. What is our continued education or outreach plan so that, you know, those folks who are still holders understand, hey, we're transitioning over to the hot passes?
We've reached out to them on several different occasions. We've also given them free service for the rest of this year so that they could continue to ride. I actually had the opportunity to meet with two of the business stakeholders that had the paper fare on the train and talk to them in person myself. He said he was reluctant that it was going away. However, he really appreciated me taking time to really talk to him about it. But he said it's well needed with the change with technology and also moving forward. He stated too that he understands that it's time for everyone that have the paper pass to be able to pay for their service. So I think the continued education will have marketing continue to reach out. Also, our public affairs teams kind of to continue to reach out and educate and talk with them as well.
Thank you. And may I have just a follow-up question? I know that there's, sorry, my iPad just disappeared, but so I'm just looking at the financial and budget impact that if we eliminate, the current existing bus pass, that we will no longer incur approximately $225,000 per year. And that also comes to about $10,000 per year cost of issuing paper punch cards for Lyft passengers. I think that's a pretty significant amount. And so can you tell us a little bit, Sam, of where those cost savings would go?
From the services?
Correct, yeah.
Nancy, can you come forward? I know that there was a little bit of conversation that we had about this, and also I know we were talking about putting it back into service-related expansion, but I just want to make sure that if I'm not speaking the right verbiage, you could correct me here.
No, you're right on track, Sam. But if there's any clarification or a question, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay. Sorry, I missed that. So it will go to service
Enhancements. Right.
Okay. I personally think that's important for the public to know that, if we're going away with modernizing, the system, then, the added benefit back to them, right, is that hopefully there'll be more service that they can rely on. So just want to make that comment.
Absolutely, and that's why it's critical for us to get the personnel to be able to increase the service and put more service out on the street.
Okay.
Director Gonzalez.
Thank you, President Simmons. Thank you very much. Mine is more of a comment and a sanity check, really. From the proposed update to the definition of service change, I just wanted to sanity check myself and confirm that the new definition looks as though it is an editorial update and a cleanup of the language, which does not materially change when we would or would not be prompting a Title VI analysis. which is to say that it looks like we're not creating any new elevated threshold for Title VI analysis through this update. And I just wanted to confirm if that's the case.
That is correct.
So thank you very much. And just so for us sort of normal walking around folks, I really appreciate that you're going through this update to the language just to clean it up. I see that it is much easier to read. It doesn't look like we're changing the definition of service in any way that's going to affect how we reach out to the public and how we ensure that we're serving the public well.
Thank you.
All right. Any ordinance requires a roll call vote, and so I'm going to ask Ms. Devine if she would please call the roll.
Thank you, Ms. Board President. I'll start with Director Edwards,
Aye.
Director Gonzalez,
Aye.
Director Bauman,
Aye.
Director Way,
Aye.
Director Kim,
Aye.
and Director Simmons.
Aye.
Ordinance 368 passes unanimously.
Good. I have a bit of housekeeping to take care of, and it has to do with the general manager's evaluation. I realized that when I asked for the motion to accept his performance review, I did not indicate the percent of his salary increase, and we are providing the general manager with a 3% pay raise. Sorry for not getting that in there in the motion at that time. So that concludes our resolutions and ordinances, and if there is no other business to come before the board, then I'm going to adjourn the business portion of the meeting. We do have a board strategy session scheduled on October 5th, and our regularly scheduled business meeting is October 26th. We do have an item today for a board briefing on the Forward Together service concept and recommendations that was just completed. TriMet will take the recommended bus network changes to the community for input before finalizing any changes to the bus routes. But let's take a 10-minute break before we actually go into the briefing. So let's come back at 10:40.
I want to welcome everyone back, and this morning's board briefing focuses on Forward Together, better known as Comprehensive Service Review. I'm still old hat on that. And it is a roadmap for TriMet based on a comprehensive, as I said, service analysis to help the agency best serve our region. General Manager DeSue.
Thanks, President Simmons and board. Welcome. Haven't seen you in a while, actually. Forward Together is a major undertaking, and before I go to I truly want to thank Senior Planner Grant O'Connell for his leadership on this effort as well. So I want to thank you, sir, on that. Mm-hmm. The goal of Forward Together is developing a concept for the future of transit services in a world that's changed by COVID-19. Using our comprehensive service analysis, we're working to determine how travel patterns have changed. For example, do most trips include downtown Portland? We want to work with the community to determine where our buses should run and what is the most important to our customer. You know, buses coming more often or getting them to more places. And Grant, he's here to kick us off first. He's joined us with this look at a Forward Together draft concept as we look to launch a new round of community engagement around it today. So we'll start with Grant first, and then we'll move forward. Grant.
Good morning, General Manager DeSue, Board President Simmons, members of the board. It's really great to be back with you again, especially in person. It's nice to see all your faces. Thank you for that introduction. It's really great to be with you. So I would just note that about a year ago this time, we were with you to introduce the project and give a concept of where we were going. Then throughout the winter, we went out for some research and community engagement, and you saw some of that, kind of a quick refresher of that with John Gardner. We teamed up around the Title VI update. We also piggybacked together and engaged the community around Forward Together, and so you kind of got a good refresher on some of those survey information that was gathered through the project. And then in the spring, I was with you again, I believe April, to present the results of that survey, as well as the existing conditions and research results. And so then over the summer, using all of that data that we gathered, we worked with the consulting team to develop this concept. So I'm pleased to have with you Jarrett Walker today. Jarrett Walker's no stranger to the board, but 28 years in the industry, and his firm just celebrated their 10 years working as an independent firm, and has done over 200 projects across America, Europe, New Zealand, and Australia. So without further ado, Jarrett Walker joins us today to walk us through this service concept.
Thank you very much, Grant, President Simmons, Measure of the Board. If I could start with a personal note, I just realized that I started writing TriMet 50 years ago this year when I was in 4th grade. And another important thing about TriMet is that back in those days, I discovered that your planners of the day, your service planners of the time, had time for a geeky teenager who walked in off the street and had a bunch of ideas for what the bus route should do, which led to a summer internship at TriMet, which led to my career. So our company here in Portland is managing various kinds of network design studies for cities all over North America and Europe. But so it's a real honor to bring all that back home to TriMet and to our hometown agency, and this is really one of the highlights of my career. So, okay, there we go. So TriMet's new post-pandemic service concept is required by 3 big things that have happened. First of all, changes in demand that we all know have happened because of the way travel patterns have changed. Changes in goals and expectations. The public's values have changed. And finally, changes in the resources available to operate bus service, which I'm glad to say is entirely good news. Changes in demand, first of all. The pattern of ridership on TriMet services have changed. Obviously, ridership went down during the pandemic and is now coming back up. But it's also very important to know that peak commute ridership, what we might call briefcase ridership, fell and has continued to stay low. Those are for the commutes to the kinds of jobs that are frankly easiest to do from home. And that ridership has continued to be substantially lower. You see it if you compare a route like 76 Hall Boulevard, which has very little drop in ridership from 19 to 22 compared to a typical suburban express route like 94 Sherwood, still down by about half. Typical, kind of difference between the nature of the market being served. So where ridership has fallen less and recovered faster are to commercial and educational destinations, to retail and industrial service job centers, and to areas high on TriMet's equity index. In other words, lower income and minority areas have tended to keep riding even as other ridership has disappeared. Now, changes in goals are important too. And one of the things I really want to emphasize is that I'm never going to say that a particular network design is good. I'm only going to say it's good at a particular set of goals. And it's not for me to tell you what those goals should be. That's a very important part of defining the limits of my role as a consultant. That's why I'm not even going to say that I recommend this plan. We're putting out this plan to start a conversation to see what the goals really are. So, but what we've heard so far, particularly through this survey that we did in the spring that Grant mentioned, but also more generally, you've been hearing a lot from your community about these things, is that there are three primary priorities right now. One is to restore ridership. Another is to help with congestion, which is frankly the same thing as restoring ridership. You do the same things in response if you're trying to do both of those things. And the third is to improve services for lower income people, or more broadly conceived of equity. This got expressed in several different ways in the survey, but when you look at the combination of concern primarily about people with lower incomes and concern primarily about historically disadvantaged racial or ethnic groups, you find that more than a quarter of respondents are saying that that's really what ought to be the priority in putting service back. So what we're going to do now, so the challenge for this project is to basically take that general direction and say, okay, well, how much exactly? How far exactly do you want us to go in that direction? And the only way we can find out is just put a map out there and see how people react. So changes in financial resources. This, of course, is good news. TriMet has the resources to expand service by 38% compared to existing levels, which is about 10% over 2019 levels. Once you have the staff, of course. And that's the primary barrier to providing service right now. It's not actually operating dollars. So what we want to do here is essentially draw a picture of what the network might look like once we're on the other side of the staffing problem and can actually offer the amount of service that you've funded. Now, this is the most important slide. I'm not going to call this a proposal, and I'm certainly not going to call it a recommendation. Its purpose is to start a conversation. So what we're saying is exactly this. Based on the values and goals that the community expressed in the survey and that TriMet has been hearing from the community and many other fora, the network might look something like this. But do we have the balance of goals right where the goals are in tension? And in addition, of course, are there other good ideas for improving the design? So one of the things here we're doing is we're turning the dial toward equity. And that means more service in lower income places. It does also mean less service in some rather high income and low ridership places. Did we go too far or not far enough? I don't have an opinion about that, and I'm not expressing an opinion about that. This is simply a way of asking the community that question, and ultimately asking you all that question. Now, how do we define what transit's really achieving? I want to propose the concept of access to opportunity. I know access to opportunity is kind of a set of words that we hear a lot and that we all like in principle, but I want to take a little time to clarify how you actually measure it, because it's very measurable now. So here's a person. She's in a city full of possible destinations, things she could do, places she could go, places she could shop, work, study, worship, whatever. On the transit network, there's an area she can get to in an amount of time that she's likely to have in her day. Let's call it 45 minutes, but whatever it is. And that amount of time that's available creates what I would call the wall around her life. The wall beyond which there are things that she just really can't get to, and therefore really can't do. And So her access to destinations is the number of useful destinations that are in that area. Access to jobs, access to schools, access to shopping, whatever. Now, one of the things you'll notice right away is that transportation can help with this by moving the wall outward. Land use planning also helps with this by putting more stuff inside the wall you already have. Both of those things expand access, and it's part of why transportation and land use, as I like to say, are the same activity described in different languages. They're both doing this in their own way. Okay, so when we talk about a more useful network, what we're talking about is measurably expanding where people can get to in a reasonable amount of time that they're likely to have. So this image, for example, we've picked a spot on Northeast 148th and Halsey. If you look at the existing network, the pink area is the area that you can get to now in 45 minutes from that location. And the blue area is all of the additional area that you could get to under the draft service concept of Forward Together. And we can then quantify that overall. The median number of jobs reachable by residents in the service area in 45 minutes goes up by almost half. And over 80% of the service area residents see some improvement in their access to jobs. Not everyone, but over 80%. Access to other important destinations increases as well. Grocery stores reachable by 45 minutes. You'll see an analysis of many other kinds of destinations if you dig down into the work. The focus on equity. The concept addresses gaps in the network and prioritizes improvements, particularly in areas with more lower-income people, more people of color, more retail service and industrial workers, and I would add areas of lower-wage jobs. You'll see a much greater focus on industrial and commercial destinations with jobs particularly in mind. Median number of jobs reachable by a person in any of TriMet's equity areas goes up by 35%. For areas outside the central city goes up by 50%, and 50% more lower-income residents, 50,000 more lower-income residents and 33,000 more people of color would be near frequent service than today. Remember, frequent service, one of the foundational concepts of your bus services that are basically always coming when you need them, every 15 minutes or better, pretty much all the time. So what's in the service concept? An expanded frequent network, an expansion of the grid to new areas, more local services running every 30 minutes, expanded weekend service, which is very important, I'll come back to. New lines serving some areas that are far from transit today, particularly areas of equity concern. And, part of the package, reduced service to some low demand and mostly higher income areas. Now this is one of the points, and I want to pause on this. We could have tried something different. We could have said, okay, well, we're doing this big service expansion, so let's not cut service anywhere. Let's just leave all of the low ridership, all the service in low ridership, high income areas, and only add service to improve equity. Based on the input we got and the conversations we had, we decided to go out with something more ambitious, which is that it actually shifts some service out of higher income areas. We don't know if we have that right. I'm not recommending it. It's just out there to start a conversation. Right? Where did these ideas come from? Many of them come from the TriMet service enhancement plans. Now, some of you may remember a big effort that happened 2011 to 2016, early in the last decade. A lot of great public conversations where people got together in meetings and sketched out ideas for what they wanted the bus system to look like. Now, obviously, a lot has changed since then. Also, that was a financially unconstrained exercise and contains lots of bus routes, a lot more bus routes than TriMet can afford, even with its expanded service. We also did a transit existing conditions report that brings the data current for all of that work. And then finally, we did a lot of work together. I didn't go off and design this in my ivory tower. We did it around the table with your staff. And we also, in an earlier cycle, had the participation of a whole lot of municipal staffs. I see April Bertelson's here from PBOT. We had great participation from many of the municipal and county staffs here in putting together an earlier version of these ideas. So, big idea, the expanded frequent network. 50% more residents and jobs are within a quarter mile of frequent service with the expanded frequent network, and it's the yellow lines on this map. Now, I can't emphasize too strongly that transit becomes useful when transit is coming, and drawing a line on the map that represents a bus that probably isn't coming is a little bit misleading. And that's why I want to show people frequent network maps so they can see this is the map of services where the next bus is coming whenever you need it. And we're talking about expanding that network substantially. I'll talk about that more when we get into detail. Extending the frequent grid. The most fundamental concept of how your network works in Portland is that the network consists of routes that keep going north-south, routes that keep going east-west, forming a grid pattern. And everywhere that those routes cross, everywhere that those lines cross, it's easy to transfer. And because it's easy to transfer, it's possible to go from anywhere to anywhere else in an L-shaped trip with one transfer. So the grid pattern is immensely powerful because it's really the only way to be relevant to everywhere trips. It's very different from the old radial pattern where transit, like what TriMet was when I was a kid, which is transit's just for going downtown. That's where all the buses go. No, we're trying to take people everywhere. And the grid is how we do that, where we have the density to support the very high frequencies involved. Now, one of the things you'll see us trying to extend that grid further out to Washington County, to East Portland, down into Milwaukee, where the street network lets us do that and where the densities and demand are there to support it. Fundamental idea. There are also some other enhancements to service. Many routes that now run every 40 to 60 minutes are turned up to every 30 minutes. We have a lot less hourly service in the plan. We all know that hourly service is basically never coming when you need it and is really only a lifeline. And hourly frequencies also have the unique ability to get terrible ridership out of absolutely any land use pattern. So we don't want to do any more of that than we have to, and we've turned those up as much as we can. There are quite a few new service areas as well, particularly where driven by equity concerns, and I'll talk about those in more detail as we go through it. Weekend service, this is very important. Weekends are really the low-hanging fruit of the American transit industry right now. Before COVID, we had been working from a paradigm that really started with the rush hour commuter and said, okay, we have this sort of social service out there on weekends, but that's not really where the action is. That's what I was told when I was starting out. And now it's exactly the opposite. We're focused on that service worker who does not have weekends off. If you work in retail, you almost certainly do not have weekends off. And you have to have something that works for you all the days that you travel. When we did the redesign of Houston in 2015, we were able to put out a pattern in which the weekend service level was exactly the same as the weekday midday service level. And it was a huge success because there's an enormous suppressed demand for weekend service. So what you'll see is many lines that are currently weekday only get their 7-day-a-week service. You have 100,000 more people near service running on Sunday, 130,000 more people near frequent service on Sunday. Service reductions, as I mentioned, and you don't need to look at this table, we'll go through it map by map. But while this is a growth plan, there are areas where service would be reduced. These are lower ridership services focused either on peak commuters who really have not come back or higher income neighborhoods. I want to be careful, both low density and relatively high income. High income, therefore, not an equity priority. Low density, therefore, not a ridership priority. So those two different goals at work there. Ridership, which tells us to follow density, and equity, which tells us to follow low income. These are the neighborhoods that are neither of those. We'll see in a moment which ones they are. Let's look now at the network. And I'm sorry if this isn't completely clear on the screen. Some of the colors are washed out on the screen, but I believe you have handouts you can look at that show these maps. Central Portland. What you see here are big expansions in the frequent network. The 57 60th Crosstown, 71, Broadway Halsey, Northwest Gleason and Everett, Milwaukee Avenue, Woodstock, and McAdam. A couple of new lines that people have wanted for a long time, a continuous Tacoma-Johnson Creek line and a Columbia Boulevard line to get to all kinds of industrial destinations along Columbia Boulevard. Better links between Northeast and East Portland are a big theme with a new focus on the Park Rose Transit Center, which is a problem in the existing network. In the existing bus network, a bunch of bus routes almost but don't quite connect with each other there, and that's something we want to fix. A change that will have some particular effects on TriMet's Center Street operations but that can really improve an important line. Line 70, revised to avoid the 11th, 12th Avenue UP grade crossing, which is near my office. I can tell you all about it, but is an enormous barrier to running Line 70 on time, particularly as trains get longer. That grade crossing is right next to the Brooklyn Rail Yard, and if you're not familiar with it, as the UP is moving trains back and forth to assemble them, they sometimes sit and block that crossing. I've seen it blocked for up to an hour. So we're looking at a revision that takes Line 70 off of 17th Avenue, sends it down the east side of the tracks instead, 26th, 28th, in order to give you a line that you can at least operate reliably. Deleted segments. Even in central Portland, there are some deleted segments. The big one, Northeast 24th and 27th Avenues, the current Line 17 service as it goes north from Broadway. This segment is very close to 33rd and is entirely in areas that we would have to describe as not equity priorities, primarily Irvington. We're looking at the possibility of 33rd being a strong enough and useful enough route that we question whether we need this 24th, 27th Avenue service. They're also, TriMet has been on these streets forever, but they're very slow and difficult streets to operate on, and not streets that the city wants to really see as major arterials anyway. Southeast Herald Street, between 52nd and 82nd, also dropped as part of a redesign in order to straighten out the Woodstock line and allow us to run a continuous frequent service the entire length of Woodstock from Westmoreland all the way out to Lentz. That's been a priority. It's a priority of the city in particular because of the way it relates to their land use planning for Woodstock to be a major dense corridor, much like Division already is. But that does require some rearrangement, and that segment is one of the ones that gets removed. We're aware of some of the impacts on it. That's actually my neighborhood, but we do want to put that out there as an idea. Oh, I see. Okay, so here's, okay, I'm sorry. There we go. All right. So now I talked to you, I told you about access to opportunity, and it's important to be aware again. People are going to have lots of reactions to the specifics of what the bus route did, and there'll be lots and lots of detailed comments. But I want to keep people focused on this, which is just how this changes where you can get to. So from the standpoint of somebody at Cully and Prescott in the Cully district, that person can get to 60,000 more jobs in 45 minutes, 60,000 more professional opportunities, right? And a business at that location, 47,000 more residents can get to that location in 45 minutes. So think about the employer's point of view or the retailer's point of view in terms of access to them. The map shows you where that expansion is. You particularly see the huge expansion going out Northeast Airport Way, which is the result of how we've connected routes together at Parkrose more effectively. Lentz, similar, you see here the effect of the Woodstock line and the new 148th Avenue line expanding where you can get to from Lentz, both west and north, and then also the proposed upgrade of the Clackamas-Oregon City line, which expands where you can go to the south. 17%, from here you can get to 11% more jobs, 17% more residents from the basis of Lentz. So let's look at east now. This is the existing network in the east side, and here is the proposed, or rather conceptual network. I'm sorry, I shouldn't use the word proposed. New frequent lines, Broadway-Halsey all the way to Troutdale, upgraded to frequent service. 181st, 182nd Avenue, and Airport Way, an enormous jobs corridor that TriMet has not been serving very effectively. And again, that route restructured to serve Parkrose. Finally, Northeast 102nd Avenue from Parkrose to Gateway has frequent service here. Then all the new north-south lines with which we try to fill in a complete grid. We can't afford to run all of these frequently, but we can at least put them out there. Basically, in this network, every continuous north-south street has service on it. 112th, 148th, 202nd, and 242nd all get added as new north-south elements. So you see this complete grid. That's what's shown in blue. There's also a bit of a redesign in Troutdale that's really designed to eliminate some inefficiencies in the current network and get better service up to the Troutdale Industrial Park in the far north of Troutdale. I should add, this is a good time to mention, by the way, that on the website, you'll find a link to not just to this kind of material, but also to a detailed PDF that talks through exactly what we were thinking with each of these things, and talks through all these in a lot more detail than I can possibly cover here. Where could I go from 202nd and Division in Gresham? 41% more jobs, 24% more residents, largely due to the northward expansion of access from this location. West Side, sorry. There we go, excuse me. West Side, Beaverton, Hillsborough. Here's your existing network, quite sparse really, given how dramatically this area has grown. Here's what we're proposing, or suggesting rather, as a starting point. Frequent service added on 185th Avenue and Southwest Farmington Road, and frequent service added the entire length of Cornell, all the way from Sunset Transit Center out to Hillsborough. Then you see, in addition, the addition of new north-south services, one approximately Century, another approximately on Cornelius Pass. There are a lot of details to them. Quite a bit new service up to North Hillsborough, where there are a lot of jobs and Amazon and so on. So you see, again, us attempting to fill in that grid as much as possible and to start to get the kind of grid effects in Washington County that we've long had operating in Portland. Where can you get to, say, from Evergreen Parkway and Amber Glen? Now, here it's helpful, it's worth noticing, there are winners and losers here, and there's some areas of lost access. A low-demand service up into Bethany is dropped in the concept, and as a result, you see some red, which is access area lost. But the access area gained is not just an enormous area of equity concern in the south, parts of Aloha, but also an enormous job centers to the north and west. As a result, 75% more jobs are reachable from this location and 39% more residents. Southwest, here's the existing network, quite thin. And here's what we have in mind. Now, here there are a bunch of things happening that are really important to focus on. First of all, this is an area that has a lot of rush hour express service to downtown right now. The rush hour express service is very expensive. You own a bus that you don't use very much. You pay a driver to run a short shift where they drive the bus out, drive maybe just one trip into town, and by that time rush hour is over, they drive the bus back to the garage. People on that bus may feel like, okay, we got a decent number of people on that bus, but what you did was fantastically expensive in order to serve them. And so it's important that while nobody wants to leave any rush hour commuters behind, and we don't, we do have to be realistic about what that service costs and whether we're using that resource efficiently. So, by and large, given what's happened to peak hour commuting, the network is shifting toward a greater focus toward patterns that we can sustain all the time. I'll come back in a moment to Markham Hill, which is an extreme example of that. So what you see, for example, is some of the commuter express services to the southwest are dropped in favor of better all-day services. So, for example, currently you're running an express route out Southwest Barber right on top of a local route. The express route goes to Sherwood, the local route ends in Tigard. Just run a shuttle from Sherwood to Tigard, and then run from Tigard to Portland, and take out that duplication is what the concept is suggesting. All the trips are still possible, but it's a greater focus on creating a structure that works all day, rather than putting so much money out there just for one or two trips on the peak. The other one that will be very controversial in Tualatin is that we're talking about dropping the 96 Tualatin I-5 express service. Anyone who's ridden it or who's driven on I-5 knows that it's not really possible to operate that service reliably because of what I-5 is. We're suggesting that a better all-day pattern is going to be to take West or Line 76 up to Tigard and then take Line 12 into town. And that's realistic in the context of what remains of that kind of demand for that kind of commuting. I also want to emphasize this is an area where you do see some significant drops in coverage to low density and rather high income areas. You'll see that on parts of Boone's Ferry and the Lewis and Clark area in Portland. Lewis and Clark, of course, runs its own transit system now. And you'll see it in parts of Lake Oswego, like the South Shore, where you see segments being dropped. And again, that's an example of what happens if we go this far.
A question.
Yeah.
For Southwest, you've not provided a slide that shows how we can get anywhere.
Oh, the access slide?
Yeah,
Coming in-
it's for Southwest, it goes to Clackamas, and
Oh.
there's no illustration of where would I travel in 45 minutes, and that was available for
Oh,
other areas.
I apologize. I'll get you one of those.
Okay.
Didn't realize that was missing. I apologize.
Yeah.
I was zooming in, wondering if it was just a matter of scale.
Okay. No, I apologize. The other thing that's very important for the Southwest is the new Washington County to Oregon City service. So, extension of Line 76, which comes all the way down from Beaverton, generally along Hall Boulevard, to Tualatin, continued across I-205 to Oregon City to connect all of those west side jobs with the lower income side of Clackamas County, which is the east side, and get all those opportunities flowing back and forth. That particular improvement is tied to the tolling, tolling proposals for the Abernethy Bridge, and that's where TriMet hopes the revenue will come from for that very important connection. Now, OHSU and Markham Hill. OHSU is a huge regional job center, and historically, it's been served by running a frequent bus from downtown Portland, and then running a bunch of rush hour express buses from various parts of the city, all up there, just at rush hour. Now, the problem is that the rush hour express demand, which is the office worker primarily, is the demand that has diminished substantially. But the nurses, the technicians, everyone, the students, everyone like that is coming and going all over the clock to OHSU, and those express buses aren't there for them. Now, obviously, Line 8 does a good job at connecting Markham Hill to the north and east. There's always been this issue about connecting it south and west. And so what we're suggesting here is that rather than running this network of express buses, we take a couple of all-day services from the southwest and run them at Markham Hill from the south. We've suggested that 56 and 43 be these two routes. They would converge in Hillsdale, and then combined from Hillsdale, you'd have a bus every 15 minutes from there up to Terwilliger to Markham Hill. So if you're coming in off of anything else in the southwest that brings you to Hillsdale, whether it's from Beaverton, from Tigard, from anywhere else, you'd get off at Hillsdale and you'd have a bus every 15 minutes up to Markham Hill. We've had a lot of conversations about this. I would have preferred to extend Line 8 down to Hillsdale, but there's nowhere to turn around a bus in Hillsdale. So, some of that sort of stuff often ends up, determining what we end up suggesting here. But that's the basic idea. So how that looks then, so what you get here is a substantial expansion in access to Markham Hill from the southwest, but again, the emphasis on only doing things we can do all the time and not just at rush hour. Clackamas County, a great big improvements here tied to the hope of revenue from the tolling project. I mentioned the extension of line. So this is the existing network. This is the concept. You see Line 76 extended across from Tualatin to Oregon City. You see new high-frequency service, Macadam Corridor, which by the way is the route from Oregon City to downtown Portland. That's the way you go if you're in a hurry. And also the 79 connection from Clackamas Town Center down to Oregon City. Those are both both go up to frequent service if we have that revenue from ODOT. There's the blue lines. You see quite a bit of new service. New coverage segments in Oak Grove, Webster, Johnson City, Happy Valley, Mount Scott. Lots of areas there where there's been a lot of growth, and there are pockets of some considerable need and low income in all those areas. We've tried to streamline that. You'll also see the Oregon City local network streamlined very dramatically. The existing Oregon City network is very squiggly, and the new suggested Oregon City network is made of much straighter lines. You may have to walk a little further to those lines, but once you're on the bus, we will no longer take you in circles to take you where you're going. It's basically the trade-off. Particular emphasis on much more direct and streamlined service to Clackamas Community College. From the perspective of Clackamas Community College in particular, you get this enormous expansion in access. Someone living near there gets to 75% more jobs. 37% more residents can get to Clackamas Community College in 45 minutes. And again, you see a lot of that tied in up with those new Macadam and Clackamas Town Center frequent services out of Oregon City. So that was just a high-level summary. There's a lot more in the document, but just some key points about this concept. As we said, 38% more resources overall, which is the expansion you expect above the current level once you have the staffing issues resolved. 50,000 more residents near some service. These are mostly lower-income residents in places that TriMet hasn't gotten to. 45% more jobs reachable by the median resident. 50% more people in jobs near frequent service, 100,000 people near service running on the weekend. But again, there are pros and cons. We're not saying we have this right. We're just starting a conversation. So next steps. Do you want to take this from here?
Sure. So starting today, this information will be out to the public, and that will kick off an engagement period where we really truly do want to hear from the public about this idea and these concepts that are being put forward here. We've got a survey to launch that'll be translated into 13 different languages. We're partnering with community-based organizations to facilitate both in-person and virtual open houses, and do everything we can to really engage with the community and refine this based on public input. Though we do feel a sense of urgency with this, we feel in a way that we're maybe a bit behind other agencies in pivoting our network to the new model, the post-pandemic model. So that period is a bit brief at 5 weeks, because then if we get that initial outreach and engagement back, we can then start to formulate, starting with the next fiscal year budget cycle, some pieces of this that we do want to actually implement. And we need to know that by November, basically, to time with the budget cycle, as you well know. So that is where we stand with this. I would just clarify one minor thing on the issue of tolling. The money may not come directly from ODOT. It would be, we're just in discussions with the state more broadly. As some of you know that have been closer to that project, there's certain constitutional restrictions around that revenue. And so we're just in conversation with the state more broadly about how funding could be identified to mitigate the impacts of tolling.
I'll start off with a question, and then I'll ask everyone who may have questions. I guess Ozzy does. One thing that's not clear to me is how you would be mitigating congestion. There's a lot of moving people around, but what about the people that aren't on the bus right now, and that are, I live in Southwest, obviously, and or 217, 26. I'm not suggesting without bus on shoulder that those roads work because of the time it takes to actually create that. But what are your thoughts on how to attempt to draw some of those people out of their cars?
I think you have to think very broadly at the enormous diversity of people who end up in cars on the freeway because that is their least bad option. These aren't necessarily relatively fortunate people who are in the position to, have a nice car and drive everywhere. Right. Many of the people, the way you really reduce congestion with robust all-day service is to get the person who owns the 1990 Camry to sell their car, to get the person, or to help the person have alternatives to driving who already experiences driving as a financial burden, for example. And good all-day service makes a big step in that direction. Even if we're not essentially, competing to try to get lots of people to park at Tualatin Park and Ride and get on a bus. And frankly, the 96 is in so much congestion that it's not very attractive for that purpose anyway.
I know.
There's a larger strategy here, which is that as you increase the overall usefulness of service, lots of people who already have a good reason to not own a car finally are able to not own a car. And so it's a longer-term play. It's a longer-term play, I would have to say, than just going out there with park and ride service. But it will get you to the same place.
Okay, thank you. Let me see, Ozzy, I think, Ozzy, did you have your hand up first? I don't know, and then,
The paper, not my hand.
well,
But yes.
I call that a hand, yeah. And then Lori?
All right. Thank you, President Simmons. Thank you for the presentation. My question is about the feedback loop that has taken place and a little bit of the feedback loop that's about to take place. First of all, a point of clarification. Does the analysis that has been proposed forward here, showing what the impact to the accessibility to more jobs and to more amenities, does it factor at all any conversations about changes in land use, or are we simply talking about moving the wall out at this time?
Well, I think that the analysis that you see is based on known census information. It's based on the built city as we know it. However, the reason we had municipal staffs in the room as we were starting to develop these ideas was precisely so that we had the benefit of their energy around the kinds of redevelopment that they're all trying to encourage. Some of the ideas in here, like the continuous Woodstock service, comes really directly out of what the city of Portland wants to do with that street, and supporting, what the ideas already are for, a fairly continuous street of, with quite a bit of residential density and commercial along it. So I would say that in the absence of, the ability to do a rigorous analysis on a land use pattern that doesn't exist yet. We could go out and use, region, we could go out and use metro far future projections, but I think it's more useful, frankly, to just sit down with the municipal planners, which is what we did, and understand exactly where they are and what they're doing and what they have in mind, and make sure we're there with good service. And I should add, that's a two-way conversation. We also say back to them, that's really not a very good place. It's going to be hard to get there. Consider doing it over here instead. That's the constructive conversation.
I'm really glad to hear that's how it's going. And I understand we can't really analyze for conditions that are not even planned, much less only planned. And my hope is that as we get out with public forums, we continue to engage with our agencies in a way that can help us not only sharpen our pencil on our analysis, but help them understand how they are the push to the pull that we're trying to figure out here in where service goes and where the cities are looking to create reasons for service to exist. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate that, and I look forward to the engagement of other agencies in these conversations. I really hope they could bring some forthright thoughts to this about what they truly intend on doing, or any potential development proposals that they might be thinking about, so that we can really begin focusing on real job centers and real forecasted land use patterns.
Mm-hmm. Lori?
I'll just add, I didn't mention it, but it's not up here, but while this is out concurrently for the public, a number of us at TriMet planning staff and government affairs we've got quite a roadshow planned of going to different county coordinating committees to follow up with them and get their feedback specifically around that issue. But Jarrett said it well, but I would just cite another great example was 72nd Avenue in the Tigard Triangle. Dave Roth from Tigard told us, no, that's where our density is going. There's already a pretty remarkable building under construction there, and so we're moving frequent. We don't move frequent service lightly, but we're going to move frequent service into the Tigard Triangle as a result of his direct input to this plan. So,
thank you. And in closing, and I'll button up after this, I also want to point out that this is a fantastic moment to shine some light on the transit-oriented development policy that we've put forward. Thank you, because it is one other lever in this machine that when we are engaging with agencies, for them to know that this is one way in which their land use patterns and whatever public policies they put forward can enhance what we're doing now. I want to remind the public that our transit-oriented development policy isn't exclusive to the surplus land that TriMet currently controls. It's an invitation for any land along transit corridors to enhance that relationship with public infrastructure.
Lori? Thank you. I have a couple of questions, but I'll first say, thank you to everyone for this work. This was absolutely fascinating to read and to see the data around jobs and where people live and so on. It was also interesting to read, I think, one of the background reports that TriMet in the 70s went through kind of a rationalization of the bus system, and that we don't need a big overhaul because of that. So that was interesting to me. I am from Southeast Portland, too. That frequent service in Portland, the frequent service in Clackamas County, I feel strongly is just fantastic and really will be very well used. Woodstock, there's a tremendous amount of multifamily housing going in there right now, so I think frequent service along Woodstock is going to be very well used. So I'm really happy to see that. I'm picking up on Ozzy's point. I'm thinking about where employers are versus where they will be. Every day, every week, perhaps, we hear of employers moving out of downtown. And how do you think about that? Where employers are going to be in 5 or 10 years? Is it through these local governments?
Yes, it's the conversation with the municipal staffs whose job it is to be closest to, as planners, their job is to be close to the real estate market and the job market and the location market as they understand it. And so, the municipal planners were, quite forthright and eager to share their knowledge about where they see development happening and so on, is to make sure we were fitting to those job patterns.
Great. And then my other question is, do you think about in your analysis some of the contract services that TriMet has through Ride Connection and others? There's, I think, in Forest Grove there's a shuttle, and how do you think about that when you think about the system?
Yes, that was something that was a part of the conversation that maybe could be better represented here. For example, if you were looking at the network map of the west side, you see Glencoe and First Avenue. Ride Connection operates a Westlink service on that same route, and so we have a very low ridership line, the 46, duplicating that. And so as a part of this, we're in early conversations with our jurisdictional partners around their regional coordination program through the STIF dollars to see if we can collaborate, because a lot of our service evolved prior to that program existing. And so things like the Cedar Mill bus that's proposed there, that used to be a shuttle run by TriMet, then it became a bus route. It's always been a bit challenging for us. But now with that program, through House Bill 2017, we can have the conversation with Washington County about, is this an appropriate use of TriMet dollars versus your shuttle services? And I think this has already been well received with the counties. And for example, running north on Century through the North Hillsborough industrial area is already done by those shuttle services and is very successful, and they're saying it may warrant TriMet service. So they could then, with us taking that over, as you see on the map, then reallocate some of those shuttle dollars to cover those lower density, higher income areas that where we're pulling out of. So more to come on that, but we're in those conversations with the counties.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Wayne?
Thank you for this presentation. I have just been taking down a lot of notes in the packet, so thank you also for the packet preparer. I know this was a lot. Thank you, Kim. So I just have a couple of comments and some questions. First of all, thank you so much. I know that I think when we initially had heard about Forward Together and this project, I think I remember at that meeting I had talked a lot about the effects of the pandemic and just how much workers in particular, low wage workers, are just going to continue to use our transit system, and I believe that you really, I think, took that to heart, and I think what this analysis has shown is that that continues to be the case. The transit dependent riders before the pandemic, during, and afterward are going to continue to be our diehard fans, quite frankly. So I really appreciate the equity analysis and the focus on that, and that this is going to continue to become the new face of our ridership. And so thank you. And then secondly, I was just looking at the Clackamas improvements, and I represent the Clackamas region. So I just also want to thank you for that deeper analysis, because of not only the Tigard to Oregon City connection, but also the East Portland to North Clackamas connection. I was just talking to, actually, we were having a youth meeting on 148th and Sunnyside this 2 weekends ago. There were a bunch of young people that were East Portland coming to North Clackamas, and they were like, this doesn't make sense. We need more transit that connects us. So when you were just, some of the slides around Clackamas, I was like, yes, absolutely, check. So thank you for that piece. And then my question was around also mitigating the effects of climate change. Clackamas County, horrendous wildfires over the last several years. How are we factoring in climate change into this service improvement plan? And I also want to ask about on-time performance as well, because obviously we, love to see more service expansion that's more frequent, but if those buses aren't getting there on time for folks, then that is also an issue. So those are my two questions. And then just the last piece on climate change, I know that we also, whenever we have severe winter weather, for example, or just the summer, I think, our region tries to do our best to meet everybody, with providing more shelter, resources. And so when you had mentioned Markham Hill, particularly, and OHSU, I'm thinking about how are those buses going to get up there when it's, several inches of snow, for example, and everybody freaks out, and we don't know how to get people in and out of OHSU. I have some personal examples with that, so just wanted to ask some of those questions.
You don't need to tell an old guy like me who lived in Portland 50 years ago how totally the climate has changed. It's really astonishing. Look, there are 2 points of nexus with climate change here. Obviously, you're engaged in an electrification program which addresses the emissions that come out of TriMet vehicles. We also know, however, that all the electric cars in the world will not solve the problem of too many cars, and that reducing overall car trips is an absolutely critical element in achieving any climate change goals. Studies have shown that over and over. So then it becomes the answer to the question about congestion, which is everything we do to help someone not drive a car, and which could include helping a lower income person who has other reasons not to drive a car to not drive a car, is a step ahead for climate change. And that's really, I think, the thing that this plan can do as part of that.
As far as on-time performance, that isn't a stated goal here, but what I will say is that a lot of those, like Dr. Simmons mentioned, but like the 96 operating on a freeway and such, by stepping off of those freeways and taking the local arterial that has a more consistent travel time and has a better mix of destinations, we will probably realize some on-time performance gains. But I would say the better audience for on-time performance is Metro's Better Bus Program, and which is the evolution of the enhanced transit concepts. I think that's a regional conversation that's maybe outside of this particular effort, but certainly something that's front and center and important to lots of people's minds is how do we make transit more competitive for travel time, certainly to address climate change, definitely.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up. You mentioned the outreach, the engagement. I think when I first joined the board, there was a couple of those that this was before pandemic, so obviously it was different, but that I was able to attend out in Clackamas with maps, and folks were able to, do stickies of like, yes, like really in favor of particular lines versus the others. So do you imagine this after this meeting that I think you said about 5 weeks is when we sort of have that period? Will we be getting more information as a board in terms of when those are happening, open houses for the public?
Yes, the website should go live today, but I'm happy to make sure that that's communicated to you all as well. So you see all of that information of what we're doing with whom and when.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this phenomenal concept. And I had 3 questions. One, to be sure, this concept exercise was done without budgetary restriction in mind. Is that correct?
No, it was designed to the limit of what is financially possible in what is financially possible once you have gotten beyond your staffing problems.
Yeah.
So
okay.
it is financially constrained to that higher limit.
Okay. Thank you. And does that the 38% from the existing resources that we would need to realize this concept, does that include the services that would be reduced or go away within that additional resource?
Right. So you think you've got the 2019 service level, what you had before the pandemic. 10% above that is where we're going, and that's HB 2017. Talk about all the financial sources that go into that. That 10% above 2019, which is 38% above the lower level you're at now.
Yeah.
Is where we're going. That was the financial cap. Okay. Inside of that, then, there are all kinds of reallocations going on. So, in addition, service being moved, from Lake Oswego to East Portland or whatever, as appropriate to address the equity goals inside the plan. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to hear that it's somewhat realistic of a concept. And sort of a temperature check, as you've engaged with local jurisdictions, as we anticipate there's additional resources to come from partnerships with local jurisdictions, how certain are we that such funding would be realized with, Washington County was an example, but local jurisdictions?
I think we may be missing understanding. So this is fiscally constrained within our financial forecast. Yes. And so that full build-out vision is achievable within what Nancy's team has given us as information. So that's not the only aspect of it that's reliant upon additional funding is the frequency upgrades to certain lines that we've identified that could mitigate the impacts of tolling of the Abernathy Bridge. So the route restructuring would still happen on those specific called out lines, but we would then, if additional funding could be identified, upgrade the frequency of those lines. Yeah. But that's only 5 lines out of 90 some. The rest of it is financially constrained to what we believe we could deploy once the labor shortage abates. But there's a subtlety here that if I could explore a tad further that gets back to Director Bauman's question about further land use planning and such. There's always value. We kind of think that this is probably what our network should look like today. If we could just flip a switch, solve the labor issue, this is what we should probably be running today. This is not a long-range plan. But we did get, through the FTA, and I believe Sam's going to talk to Congress and thank them for it, but through the FTA, got a grant to revise our long-range plans around this new this is kind of like, once we get through the public outreach, our new baseline, and we will revise our long-range plans around land use changes, et cetera, into the future based on this. But those exercises are often fiscally unconstrained, whereas this is fiscally constrained.
Noted.
Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
I want to piggyback on that a little bit because of an example that you gave. I met with Washington County recently, and they have a whole list of needs that if TriMet wants to discontinue Cedar Hills. They just need money for shelter, for shuttles, because the allocation, I mean, they have a list of needs. We have transit deserts within our region. It doesn't warrant a 40-foot bus. But it's going to take significant greater allocations of regional coordination dollars to really make a difference. And so I know Washington County's ready to say, if you make a change to drop a bus, you have to make sure that there's a requisite sum of money allocated through the STIF funds to make sure that service doesn't just totally disappear.
Good point, and well taken, but that is why we're actively engaged with Washington County. But I would point out first that some of the services that you see on that network, like I mentioned to North Hillsborough, is currently served by their regional coordination dollars. So they could look at reallocating that to other areas, such as the Cedar Mail District. But also, I know it's coming up before you, but through the next biennium of STIF, we're proposing to double the resources allocated to regional coordination. So I think that's a big leap there.
Yeah, it's still not enough.
We feel the same about this network is wonderful and leaps and bounds above what we have today, but there's always more we can do.
Yeah, well,
even on our
I'm
own
a broken
network.
record. Because I'm an advocate for those of us that don't have any service at all.
Yeah.
All right.
President Simmons, may I make one more remark?
And then I'll let Ozzie he loves to have the final say.
Okay. I don't want to compete with anyone for the final word. There's something important I realize I neglected to say. Please don't be surprised if there is a lot of anger about this.
Oh, of course.
I know many of you expect this, but if you haven't been through this before, it is normal for people to have very strong feelings about when we start drawing lines on maps and erasing lines on maps. And so that's a normal and healthy part of the process, and I encourage us all, as we are interacting with all of the people who are going to come talk to us about this, to emphasize that this is very much, this whole thing is a question rather than a statement. The whole concept is a question rather than a statement. It's, here's a thing we could do. Here is a degree to which we could turn the dial toward equity. Maybe we've turned it too far. Maybe we've turned it not far enough. What do you think? And but please don't be surprised by the strength of the feeling that many people express. Every network design I've done has had that effect, and it's a normal part of the process.
There's a question in here, but I'm happy in the interest of time to kind of put this out there as simply something that's on my radar that I hope is on your radar as you move the process forward. The shuttle in Glencoe was mentioned, the shuttle with Lewis and Clark was mentioned, and President Simmons just mentioned Washington County as another sort of example of where we might be having to talk with others that are service providers in how they complement these changes that we're making. And, together we figure out what the optimum solution is. There's something I didn't yet hear, and I just wanted to put this out there as something that's very much on my radar, especially as we're going to be talking about fair policies in the next week in a strategy session. We are not the only game in town. There are other shuttle providers, and some of the mobility solutions out there now are privately held mobility solutions. To what extent are we interacting with those stakeholders in this process? And if it's outside of the scope of this, to what extent are we utilizing this process to be better informed about what we need from those stakeholders when we do sit down with them? Because they are part of this ecosystem and becoming an increasingly relevant last mile component. So I was wondering what role paratransit or other mobility providers play into this conversation.
I think this exercise was more focused on making sure our network performs as best as it possibly can for our community. What services may complement, I think, is its own standalone exercise, frankly. I don't know if you feel differently.
No, I agree, and I think it's it's important, I think, in the spirit of this being the beginning of a conversation, right? Let's start the conversation. Let's put a map out there. Let's see how these other service some of the other service providers may very well say, "Oh, great, it's good that TriMet isn't doing this because we're already doing this, or we want to do this." And others may say, "Whoa, we have a need here. How are we going to do this?" And so this gives everyone something to essentially respond to, as to sort of get the thinking going about what kind of relationships are ultimately needed and what kinds of services are ultimately needed.
I appreciate that. My hope is that we are able to leverage this process as a way to demonstrate to the region that we're interested in mobility and connectivity, whether we own it or not. And I think that's a critical place that I think our agency is well served by holding. Mm-hmm. It's not a place anyone's handing to us, but no one seems to be having that conversation, and it behooves us most. So I really appreciate that, and I look forward to seeing what we learn through this process. Thank you.
If I could ask, just to make sure I follow suit to your wishes on that, but just beyond the regional coordination program of the county shuttles and various, like Lewis and Clark's student shuttle, et cetera, is there something else you're thinking of that I may be not thinking of? An example? Yeah,
front of mind, when we go out to municipalities, for example, and they're revealing, well, here's what we're thinking in land use, or here's what we know of some job centers on the horizon. I think it's good to know what conversations they've had with mobility providers that serve their jurisdiction. Are there standards they've placed? I've heard of some expectations around where scooters should and should not be, making sure they're spread out throughout the region. These little tidbits, I think, could help inform what a standard node, what a standard bus stop, what a standard shelter amenity might need to consider.
So you're thinking scooters, bike share, new mobility type. Okay.
And even the Ubers and I don't like using brands, even the para-mobility, privately held, contracted people on the right-of-way.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I think this is really important, as I've said to General Manager Dessou. Our ridership started declining before the pandemic, and the pandemic just exacerbated it and changed all kinds of different work patterns and everything. The fact that we designed a bus system, a number of years ago, and the changes that have taken place. We have to look at bus stops and consider, do we have them too close together? Is that affecting, the speed at which people are moving through the system as well? There's a whole aspect of all of this. This is one of the most complex organizations that I've worked with because of all the different pieces and parts that it takes to make it work. But I think this is absolutely a critical step for the organization, with or without the pandemic. It just kind of made it rise to the surface more. But thank you. We've had you here before talking to the board, I think when I first got on the board. So I really appreciate your work and the success you've had in so many different areas around the country. So thank you so much for working with us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
We're adjourned.